So when we start to understand, when we integrate these wounds and integrate these traumas, a powerful gift emerges. And that's often what we're meant to give to the world, is the gift of the wound that we experience when our emotional experience. Not to say that we're meant to become overwhelmed by it or lost in the swamp of emotions, but that those emotions are actually the building blocks of helping us find it.
New Age Human Podcast. I'm your host, John Estacio, and today's episode we're talking with James Eshelman. Now, James is a psychedelic guide, transformational coach, and thought leader. Now, if you're interested in the intersection between masculinity and psychedelics, healing wounds of the past, and the reality of trauma, you've come to the right episode. Now, before we begin, I just ask, we're looking to grow the show, and I want to hear from you. So what's working? What's not working? What do you want to hear more about in the podcast? Is there anybody specific you want me to interview? I'm looking to serve the community and see what you're interested in. Now, if you want to contact and you want to give some feedback, just go to newagehuman.com. You'll see the contact me button. Send me an email. Go straight to me. I read every email. Now, with that said, thank you for joining me today. Let's get to the show. All right. James Eshelman, thanks for coming on the show. How's it going, man?
It's going good, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. I'm actually jealous. If anybody's watching, he's got this awesome picture behind him of, I think it's a Native American with a mohawk and like some face makeup. Can you just, I need to address that image. Does it have a background? What's going on there?
Yeah. Well, there's a Native American fair that happens in Denver every year, and this father-son duo do these incredible paintings, and the father usually draws these like older, wiser men that are very, distinguished, and the younger son paints these more colorful, sort of younger, identified individuals. And I walked in, and I really wanted to embody more of the warrior archetype, and so I felt this, as I stared at this painting, this deep gaze from this painting of sort of the courage, assurance, and clarity that it takes to kind of be a man in the world. And so it serves as a source of inspiration for me, and something that I try to embody every day.
Yeah, you know what? You bring up an interesting perspective where you saw the image and it's like, it's a warrior, and you're like, that's inspiring, right? And especially as a guy, I remember as a kid just thinking like, I'm gonna be a badass, like I'm gonna learn all these martial arts, like you just, it's in your blood that you just want to be some like dominate. It's I guess whether it be the testosterone or the cartoons, right? It's just like it's that thing, and it's actually, you know what, you're inspiring me to get something like that for myself and to put it in front of my display here when I'm talking to people, just to get myself into that mode, because I'm getting into that mode looking at your painting there. And I do appreciate that is part of what you're doing. You're working with an interesting twist of combining psychedelic experiences and masculinity. And I really want to dive into that because that is part of that, like that inner journey to self-discovery. And I'm pretty sure you can agree that masculinity is something that needs to be worked on in today's world. But I definitely, before we get into that, I want to get into your beginnings. What got you into what you're doing now as a transformational coach? You're a psychedelic guy. You're doing a lot of cool stuff, but like, what got you into that? Because I'm sure anybody who's listening wants to know, like, how did this happen?
Well, I think like any journey, there's like this long and winding path. And I was raised in sort of a traditional household and expected to fulfill roles. And I think the roles in which I was expected to play gave me some measure of groundedness in the world, and gave me a path forward, And that path was really started off down the path of business, and so I studied finance in college and got into the finance world when I graduated, and worked there for 3 years, and that that path of fulfilling responsibility, you know, the responsibilities that family sort of projects on you, society projects onto you, and, you know, the requirement to earn and make money, make a living, and raise a family, and all of that, right, really comes along with, you know, what your vocation is in the world. And I, in my windy path, was just, you know, I could feel myself feeling really unfulfilled in my job in finance, and one day just felt this compelling, you know, move, almost like this outer body experience where I just stood up from my desk one day because I couldn't take it anymore. I felt like I was selling my soul to the devil a little bit. Ugh. And so I kind of quit my job right there on the spot, and then sat my first plant medicine journey a few days later. And that was, to me, that was like the shedding of an identity or of a role, you know, that I was supposed to stay in business and supposed to be in finance, and that was where I was going to bring value to the world. And that was getting in the way of what I was actually supposed to be doing, which, you know, is to be in service to other people in a deeper, more meaningful way. But that only revealed itself over time. I had to really make that leap, you know, to break that identity apart, to make room for this new one, which I had, again, no idea that was what was emerging at the time, but that's sometimes what it takes is that leap of faith.
You straight up quit your job and a few days later went on a psychedelic trip. That's what's like getting to me, because for me, I'm like, did you have a game plan? Was it just like, did you just snap? I'm very curious. And then the other question I have is, were you already planning on doing a psychedelic trip before you made that decision?
Yeah, the trip was already on the schedule, but it at the time I couldn't link the two. You know, I couldn't link the need or the you know, me quitting my job to like, I'm stepping into this and I'm choosing a different identity. It was just like, I've had enough of this. I got to get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
And
was it a Monday?
It was January 31st, so 2017. So I don't know what day that was specifically, but I do know the exact date. Probably a Monday. Yeah. I think, you know, it was very spur of the moment.
Well, yeah,
when I quit that job, you know, I was just sitting there at my desk stewing for some reason. And then I just sort of left my body. I walked into my manager's office thinking I was going to give them a 2 weeks notice. And they were like, okay, well, security is going to escort you out of the building in 5 minutes. Go get your things. And that was the assurance that I needed, that I was making the right decision.
So leading up to that, this sounds like what you were in finance. So I'm guessing you had a desk, a cubicle, and it's like that box prison where you have like images of your family. I'm just taking a guess. Anxiety, stress, all that. I'm sure that was building up, right?
Yeah, anxiety, stress, depression. I had a really poor relationship with alcohol, you know, dealing with the discomfort of having to wear a mask every single day, you know, where I wasn't able to be my full true self.
Everybody was wearing a mask in the office?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I haven't
the
been
professional mask. Yeah.
Wait, was it like what do you mean by professional mask? Was it like I'm thinking of a mask that you would wear with a suit and tie. Like is it made out of like a was it a designer mask? Like
well, you know, it was hard to connect to anything that was really truly authentic in individuals. Right?
Yeah, you can't see their mouths, and it's just eyes at that point.
Right. And there's people who are trying to build their career, and so they're presenting certain aspects of themselves, whether it's wanting to project the outer success onto the world, wanting to project the power dynamics out into the world. And I'm a pretty authentic guy, and so my authenticity craves authenticity in other people. And I can feel the disconnect when people aren't being authentic with me. And so it it created this rift between me and the people that I worked with that it was depleting to have to, balance this desire for an authentic human connection in that world with what was actually being presented and what was being withheld. So that was just kind of a facet or a piece of it, right? Of recognizing that I wasn't in authentic relationship with my life and the world around me in that space. And so that was sort of the thing that popped me up out of my seat, I think, in hindsight, and said, like, well, if it's not here, then it's got to be somewhere else. I don't know where it is, but I'm going to go and find it. So then I sat my first, plant medicine journey about 4 or 5 days later, and sat pretty regularly with ayahuasca and doing my own personal healing work. And I had a lot of work to do at that particular point in time in my life. There was, again, just the depression, anxiety, the alcohol, I wouldn't call it alcoholism, but the poor relationship with alcohol. And all of that was sort of the surface level tension that was, a symptom of the deeper tension that I didn't really have a more, authentic, or I should say deeper relationship with my purpose in life. And so with plant medicine, it was the journey of peeling back the layers of conditioning that had been created over a life of trying to fulfill a role outside of myself rather than living, an authentic life that was meaningful to me.
So wait, so we're talking about these layers, and when I hear layers, I think of Shrek and, we're like onions, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that your psychedelic experiences with, I think before we get into like what exactly you're working with, the question that popped up in my head was, each time you went through an experience, was it like another layer type of situation? Like, how was that? And was it easy in the beginning? Is there a recommendation as far as like how fast you should go? Because I'm sure we all have these layers of programs that we bought into, and those attachments being to our ego, and with what you are helping people with, it seems like you're helping them delayer. So is any advice on what worked for you in that delayering process?
Well, I would, my journey is not a journey that most people go on. My work with psychedelics in the early days was I was so hungry for the work. I was so hungry to peel back these layers. I had so many layers to peel back. And then I also had, behind all of that too, was that this is what I was supposed to be doing for my vocation too, is guiding people through these experiences. So my commitment to this work in these medicines was a commitment to understanding what it means and what it takes to hold space for people while they're going through experiences of their own. I was at once both doing my own personal work, and then in the early days, unbeknownst to me, like learning more about the psychedelic realms and the realms of, consciousness that were helping to paint the landscape of how I would show up and serve other people, in the future going forward. And so that it's, what I experienced was that, you kind of, psychedelics open up the door, right? You still got to walk through the door, and you still have to integrate the experience and make sense of it. But what I noticed about myself is that I was opening up so many doors, regularly, and walking through them with, a certain veracity that I was just so hungry for knowledge and so hungry for wisdom that I was gaining so much from these experiences, even though as frequently as I was doing them. And so it's kind of like, it's you open up one door, you walk through it, and then 10 more doors appear, and so then you've got to walk through those 10 doors, and then 10 more doors appear to each one of those doors. And I loved, getting to explore all those different parts of myself, and what was teaching me so much about my own conditioning, my own experience as a human being, and my relationship with the world around me.
When you say opening up doors, are you saying, in my mind, I'm thinking you're opening up a door and it's like a scene and you're seeing yourself in third person. What does opening up a door mean to you?
I see them as doors of perception, right?
Mm,
So, yeah, with each door that you open up, you see yourself in a different way. And there's this infinite way in which we can sort of view our human experience, and to break free from the conditioning or the ego structures or the identities, we have to see ourselves from different perspectives and embrace, this sort of multitude of perspectives that's unfolding at any particular point in time. So that's kind of what it is just seeing yourself from a different lens. And I had so many different threads of self work that I had to do, that these medicines, particularly ayahuasca, really helped me understand a lot about myself.
so ayahuasca and I think I'm saying it right. Psilocybin,
Psilocybin.
psilocybin. Which one do you like more? What if you had to choose, which one do you feel you've got the most out of?
In my own personal experience, it would be ayahuasca. My relationship with that is very natural and rich and robust. My spirit, my being works really well hand in hand with that medicine. And then from a service, like in being in service to other people, the way that I work works really well with psilocybin. And so in my coaching sessions, I work with that medicine, and the structure of how I set up the containers that I offer to people helps to bring out the best in that medicine for others.
Okay, so let's get into your sessions, what you're working with. What are your thoughts, or maybe I should present it in a different way. How do you see these experiences that you're helping guide people into? How do you see this helping with masculinity? Because my thought was, isn't ayahuasca like a feminine energy that's like that earth energy? And so you're going to in my mind, okay, this is me never having a trip. I'm thinking, how would you go to a feminine energy to learn about how to be more masculine? How do you how do you get that done?
I think, I mean, first and foremost, that acknowledgement that these medicines are innately feminine is in my mind, fundamentally true. And in order to understand how they work with men, you sort of have to understand what ails men, right? And the way that traditional masculinity has been conditioned in the world is that we gain love by playing roles and doing things for other people, right? And sort of striving out there in the world, whether it's accomplishing, providing, protecting. There's always this outward energy that we have to be doing something in order to achieve, this capacity for love. And so what I see these medicines doing is breaking down this sort of the silos that men put themselves in, or men maybe naturally find themselves in, which is that we only get love through transaction. And so when men work with medicine, it is the invitation to recognize the feminine nature, whether that's feminine nature that's within or feminine nature that's without out there in the world. And masculinity, kind of looking at men, men as we have masculine qualities, and we all have feminine qualities as well. We are both, providers and protectors, and we also feel, we feel emotions, whether people want to acknowledge it or not. They're
Or
there.
if you like hide them all the time, right?
Yeah, yeah. Hide them all the time, or just bypass them, steamroll them. It's happening, and so these medicines invite us to come into contact with our feminine nature. And it's not to say that, we're overtly feminine, but when we allow ourselves to feel and embrace our sensitivity rather than close ourselves off from our sensitivity, we can become more resourced because we're more connected to life around us, right? more able to sense maybe the women in our life, and maybe more able to sense the life force energy that's around us if we're out in nature, right? Or resourcing love from our environment, being able to receive love, which is a big challenge for men. And so by resourcing or coming into contact with our femininity, our masculinity naturally feels more nourished. And that's where, we are, when we are at our best as men, is when we're able to nourish ourselves, our own masculinity, with our own inner femininity, right? Without depending upon a feminine being in our life, to provide us with what we're not giving ourselves. And so that invitation is really important for us to do that healing work, for us to feel our pain, for us to feel our anger, for us to feel our sensitivity. And as we do, we come into contact with our deeper authenticity, right? What moves us emotionally in the world is oftentimes presenting the roadmap for what we're supposed to do in the world. And not like from a role perspective, but from like, a purpose perspective, that we're all given these missions in life, and our emotional experience, not to say that we're meant to become overwhelmed by it or lost in the swamp of emotions, right. but that those emotions are actually the building blocks of helping us finding the thing that we're supposed to do in the world.
So it sounds like it's almost, and I should have asked this earlier. I'm guessing this happened to you. This is helping men release those emotional blockages. And yes, it's a feminine energy, but it's also giving you a different perspective of your feminine side being okay with it. And now that you're okay with it, it's more in balance so that you can start embracing the masculine side. Because I feel that personally, growing up, I would say most of the childhood was more like it was just me and my mom. Even though she remarried, it was she had more of an influence, and so I, as a guy, felt what do you call it? Contradiction in energies, where the feminine energy and she's very feminine, and so I felt bad for wanting to be a guy, right? And then her saying, "Don't do this, don't do that," and trying to figure out the balance between the two, so I can appreciate that, where you're just resetting, right? And then you're accepting of who you are, what you're interested in, and at the same time, like, it seems like, yeah, there's a lot of energy balancing going on. But what I didn't ask, and I want to ask now, is you were going through some anxiety. You got up and you left your job, and you're like, "This is it. I'm done. I'm gonna get escorted out." You went from 2 weeks to today, right? Leaving, could have been on a Monday. How did that ayahuasca journey that you did help you? And how quickly did it help maybe with what you were dealing with at that time? I'm curious.
The first experience that I had was my first experience with psychedelics. And so before that, I was very identified with my experience, identified with, my belief systems, my identities. Like, I was sort of rigid and inflexible. And I think what that first experience did was allowed me to zoom out and see myself from a higher, lens, a different perspective. And in that, just, it sort of created space for me to play a little bit more with who I actually wanted to be. And then, I've been doing this work a long time, and I've done a lot of journeys, so a lot of them sort of bleed together in a way, right? But the common thread in the experiences was that it essentially created a deeper relationship with, source energy, God, the divine, right? It gave me a measure of faith and trust and belief that I was being directed in life from something that was outside of myself. And And I think that gave me more opportunity to just be more creative with who I am and who I want to be in the world. And um, what what really actually inspired me, rather than what I was supposed to be doing in the world because of what I was told I was supposed to be doing in the world, right? So that's kind of the thematic for me is breaking free from all of these imposed uh, roles. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, because you were in a place, from what I understand, you were in a place where you were just not congruent with who you are, and you in breaking free, you have all these doors you opened up, and being okay with yourself and being in more alignment with yourself. My way is more on meditation and connecting with nature on like nature walks and stuff, where you just kind of like reconnect, reset. And I can only imagine ayahuasca is like that rocket ship further away. You're a guide of a lot of trips, and you helped a lot of people on trips. I think what I'm reading here is 200 plus individuals you've helped with one-on-one psilocybin ceremonies since 2019. So you have a good amount of experience under your belt. Do you have any stories you want to share of people that were in a very dark place and then they were able to change their life around? I've always feel like those are like the best stories.
Yeah. Well, I would say that by and large, every single one of those journeys sort of has that thematic to a degree. And but then there are some stories that stand out. One of the more difficult journeys that I've ever facilitated, I lead everybody through a preparation process, which includes an intake, and I get a sense of who they are and what they're wrestling with in their life, and also get a sense of any risk factors that might come up in the experience. And I did a journey with a gentleman maybe a year ago, and we had a great preparation process. It was really solid, and then I took him into a journey, and about 2 hours into the experience, he sort of sat up and had this this great sense of fear in his eyes, and it was extraordinarily challenging for him to face that and confront that. There was a voice inside of his head that was essentially telling him that I was, maybe out to get him, or I was like setting him up for something. And so, he had a really challenging experience, and it was really challenging to facilitate that experience for him. And it ended up leading to, me kind of walking with him through his neighborhood for about 2 hours just to sort of, ease the stress of the experience. But ultimately, he came into contact and realized that when he was a young kid at 5 years old, he experienced some sexual abuse from one of his brothers. And it was a memory that he had suppressed his entire life. And eventually, in that experience, came to a point of healing where he was able to release the responsibility that he felt for what had happened. And through that, I think he really forgave himself and forgave his brother, and was able to heal some pretty significant demons that he had held on to for about 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and this is a man who is a father of two boys, and stay-at-home dad, and it's only made him more emotionally available to his kids, and made him able to show up in his relationship that much more, and it's things like that. When you're carrying around a weight that is that big, for 30 years, you don't really realize just how heavy that is until you let it go. And so since then he's just been thriving.
Wow. And to think that he was able to remember after that experience. I really like how much support you gave him. You walked with him for 2 hours. Like, is that a normal thing where like you wake up and you had this experience and you just need to walk it off? Like, is that like a normal thing, or is that like a one-off?
It doesn't happen. No, not very often. I mean, most people are, able to just stay pretty much put in one place. And so those journeys are a lot easier for them and for me. But what served him was getting out of the house and getting some movement in. And so, I think my responsibility as a facilitator is just to pay very deep and close attention to what is going to serve people, in moving through whatever they're wrestling with. And so you never know exactly what that's going to look like, but just being able to respond to the moment is a really important thing.
When you sit down, are you mostly working with guys or some women as well?
It's probably split about 50-50, men and
Really?
women. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I was wondering if it was like mostly one direction or the other, but it sounds like you got an even split. That's surprising. Huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And wow. And when you do these ceremonies, is it mainly just you and the other person, or is it in an area? Because I know like some people fly out to a different country, or are you more local in the U.S.?
I'm pretty local in like Colorado. Yeah. So most of my clientele is here. I'd say, the majority of people that find me have found me through word of mouth over the last 5 years. And so I've got this network of people here that I've worked with primarily. And then people do fly in from out of state to come and work with me. But the way that our law here is set up in the state of Colorado allows me to do the work that I do. Yeah.
I remember just there's sometimes creatures that pop up. Any themes you've seen recently that pop up, whether it be like specific experiences that people share with you? I'm very curious.
Ayahuasca has a lot of archetypes,
Uh-huh. Okay, so they're
and
called archetypes. Okay.
yeah, and specifically with that medicine, the snake is an animal that shows up in those experiences quite often. The snake being the symbol of transformation,
Hmm.
right? And the shedding of skin and the new skin that is revealed in that, right? A lot of these medicines, that's kind of the metaphor. And then there's also, for me, what shows up often is a jaguar. So I've sat
Really?
in some medicine experiences where I'd be sitting in stillness, and I'd feel the presence of the jaguar enter the room, and would kind of walk around the room and not in, very quiet, like it's almost stalking, but then it would kind of like walk up behind me and place its head right on top of my shoulder. And so I have this, yeah, I view the jaguar as the protector of the jungle, and it's an animal that I have a relationship with just from sort of that spiritual perspective. And then, the way that the mind works too is the psyche will project images in the mind to help us make sense of complex topics and complex ideas. And so
Hmm.
various mythology will show up, or archetypes will show up for the individual based upon what makes sense for them and what they're going through in their life.
So what would the jaguar mean for you?
Well, the jaguar is, it has the most powerful bite by weight in the cat family, and so it's extraordinarily powerful, but it's also very self-assured. It moves through the jungle very gracefully, and sort of operates too in sort of this very, I guess, very powerful way, where it's feared and respected and appreciated for its grace. And so for me, that's where I draw inspiration from in terms of self-assuredness and its ability to move through time and space, gracefully.
I can see you having a painting of a jaguar.
I
Like,
have one.
oh, yeah, I'm not surprised. At least one. I'm actually curious. What other archetypes have you seen that maybe were unexpected?
Hmm. For me, in my experience,
You or other people, you're like, wow, I didn't think a rabbit would be inspiring, but like just you
yeah,
never know, right?
uh, you know, mean, metamorphosis is something that really comes to mind, and the spirit of the caterpillar. The caterpillar goes into the cocoon, right? Melts down.
It's true.
And has to reorganize and restructure to become a butterfly, and it's extraordinarily vulnerable when it's in a cocoon. But it needs to be vulnerable like that in order to become what it's ultimately meant to become, and to be able to fly as butterflies are able to. So the caterpillar and the cocoon and the butterfly are archetypes that I kind of caught me by surprise, the depth to which it has inspired me to lean into the discomfort of, breaking down, the inner structures of identity, that I'm, no longer meant to be a caterpillar, but I'm actually beginning the uncomfortable journey of becoming a butterfly. And, there's a beauty in that, because a butterfly is not thought of as, it's beautiful, but it doesn't strike me as a very masculine, powerful archetype.
Wait, so is this something that you saw that was inspiring for you, that butterfly?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, through those experiences, becoming the caterpillar and building your own cocoon, and, nesting in the discomfort and the pain of, digesting our human experience, and then eventually breaking open the cocoon and becoming the butterfly. That archetype has shown up many times in many journeys.
It kind of reminds me of that movie. I think it's A Bug's Life, where you have the ladybug, but it was a guy, and you got the guys whistling, and he's like, "Hey, hey, hey, we're not all ladies."
Yeah.
So that kind of reminds me, because you're like, yeah, you wouldn't think that like a butterfly would be something that would be inspiring, but the whole depth of it and that transformation is like, wow. And it does seem like what you're doing is you're helping, that's that transformation that you're helping everybody with, where they're going within and they're seeing a different aspect of themselves. I can appreciate the masculine side, where you're okay with certain things that you've been blocking, and then, or that guy who unblocked his childhood trauma that he did not know of. I can only imagine how many people have trauma in their past. I mean, do you see that often more recently, where people have a lot of trauma blocked, or do you see it like, or more of like a work thing? I'm curious to see like what you've seen as maybe trends for people that they're dealing with.
I think most of the people that I work with, if you really boil every experience down, or every coaching container down, or every client's experience down, there's almost always some work around a wound or some kind of a trauma that people need to work through. And so, by and large, that is, it's a part of every person's experience, whether that trauma is like, I've got to be this person for this person because that's how I get love, right? Or my relationship sucks because I can't communicate my feelings, because when I was a kid, it wasn't safe for me to communicate my feelings without backlash from my parents, right? Or, I don't feel connected to my purpose because I'm trying to get love from my parents by, achieving all these external outcomes without feeling at peace with my inner self. So every single issue that we're facing out there in the world always has a root in an inner conflict that we're dealing with. And I really, what I love to do is I love to work with that inner conflict and that inner tension, because that's what gets composted and alchemized when we go to that place, start to understand why we do the things that we do, what we're ultimately trying to accomplish with them, and then shifting our perspective to then soften our reaction to that trauma or to that wound, and then begin to choose a newer, more accurate assessment of our reality and what we actually want in the world. And so I've created a coaching program that really distills everything that I've learned from the psychedelic space down into, a program that anybody can do and doesn't involve psychedelics, but helps to, it still has that seed of wisdom in how we can approach the wound and alchemize the trauma to actually turn it into something meaningful. And one of the fundamental beliefs that I have is that, where the wound is or where the trauma is often where we have our greatest gift. For me, one of my biggest wounds was that that I didn't feel like the people in my life were present with me. And so one of the gifts that I bring to other people is the gift of presence, is the gift of self-acceptance or acceptance of another and unconditional love. So when we start to understand that we actually, when we integrate these wounds and integrate these traumas, a powerful gift emerges. And that's often what we're meant to give to the world, is the gift of the wound that we experienced when we were younger.
That's interesting. Because at the end of the day, right, it's, especially in the US, where I think worldwide at this time, there's this trauma. No one knows what they're doing as a parent. We're all figuring it out, right? You're bound to have some trauma or drama. If it's not the culture, it's the parents, and if it's not the parents, it's the family. If it's not the family, then it's the food or the politics. And I feel like something's gonna happen, and you're not alone. Something happened, and you probably don't know, and it's okay. You're here, and you're gonna go through an experience. You're gonna remember what that was that you're fighting, and you forgot all about it, and you built this whole persona, thinking that's the way life is. And it seems like you see that a lot. You saw that in yourself. You saw that in other people. And this is helping with that, right? That looking, like, I guess they call it like the inner child, or there's just different ways to go about it. So I think that's pretty cool that's your focus. And I'm not surprised, because when you leave yourself and you have that perspective, you get to see all the stuff that you layered up on yourself, right? But it also was interesting, and I caught what you said. You're like, you don't need psychedelics for this program that you created. Is that correct? I'm very curious why you did it that way, because you're a guide for transformation, and one of the main things you use is psychedelics. So why would you create a guide that might not even use that? I'm curious.
I think I've done so much work in the psychedelic space that I have come to the place where I realize that a lot of the gift of what psychedelics does is it presents us with new technologies, right? A new technology for self-love, a new technology for self-acceptance, a new technology for how we can relate with ourselves. And so, as it stands right now, psychedelics are really valuable because they're moving people in the world from a state of, being unwell to a new baseline of just being well enough that they can move through the world, right? And so I think when you work with psychedelics long enough, you realize that you don't actually need them anymore, and that you can become the medicine, as I like to say. And so I bring that perspective into those coaching containers, that I can distill down, a lot of what these psychedelic experiences have given me and what they've given to other people into a really approachable way for people who maybe don't want to work with psychedelics to still experience the benefit and the wisdom that comes from psychedelics without having to experience them themselves. But then, of course, if people want to work with them, like, my door is always open. To experience it for yourself is quite profound. But for me, it's just another gateway for people to begin to step into the work of being human and embracing the reality that we're all wounded in life and we're all traumatized. And there's nothing you can do as a parent to avoid wounding or traumatizing your children. Right. And you can't protect your children from the world wounding and traumatizing them.
We're all messed up, man. We're all messed up.
We're all messed up. And like, that's a beautiful thing, because like it's the wounds and the traumas that invite us into our greater gifts. And so to me, it's not about getting rid of trauma. It's about learning how to live and embrace the gift that the trauma is actually providing the roadmap to our highest purpose in life. And that's what we want, is we want a population of people who are alive and awake to, one, what is painful about their experience, and two, what they can do in service to other people because of the pain that they have experienced in life. It's this gift of alchemy that ultimately gives us meaning in the world. It's a beautiful thing.
So, James, is there anything that maybe we glossed over, that we didn't talk about, that came up to mind that you wanted to mention? Is there anything that you feel like you wanted to share before we close out today?
Well, we talked about a lot.
Yeah, we did.
I think, one of the most important things I've come to realize in the work that I do is that intention really matters. Preparation really matters. Integration really matters. It's really easy to look at psychedelic experiences as a sort of holy grail, the end all be all, the silver bullet. And as much as they can teach us about ourselves, without an adequate preparation and integration process, and what I think is included in that is having a guide, or having somebody that's capable of holding space for you, and also reflecting back to you the unconditional love that's in your own heart through how they show up for you, and what they can teach you about yourself. Those are really important. Those are really important factors, and I think the preparation and integration is actually more important than the experience with psychedelics themselves. And so, if people are curious about psychedelics for their own healing, I would say do your best to find somebody who is going to be a good steward for you, and when you are looking for somebody, a really important factor to consider is how deeply have people gone with these medicines themselves into their own work. Guides, coaches, people out there in the world who are, who you're calling on for services, can only take you as deeply as they've taken themselves. And so any kind of vetting process that you put people through for coaching, guiding, facilitation, whatever, ask them what they've put themselves through and what they've learned along the way, because that will help to paint the landscape and the picture for how they are going to serve you, and bring as much intention to this process as you can, because I think as a general thematic in life, the more intentional that we can be with how we show up in a moment-to-moment basis, how we show up at a family function, how we show up at a business meeting, how we show up in a moment of conflict with our primary partner, or any relationships that we have in the world, is a sort of microcosm for how we show up for ourselves. And it's intention, the way we connect to our own intention in the world, that ultimately over time is going to predict how fulfilling our life is.
So now that we know who you are and how you help people, and we're all messed up, but we can do better. Is there anything that you're working on right now that you wanted to shed light on, or a future project? And two, what is the best way for anybody to contact you that you suggest?
Well, so my website, centerofalldirections.com, has a fair amount of resources and explanation for who I am and what I do in the world. I offer this 8-week transformational coaching program that embraces all the wisdom that I've gleaned from the use of and guidance with psychedelics. And so that's available for people who really live anywhere, who want to better understand what makes them tick in the world, and what brings them meaning and purpose, and also what helps relieve stress. People are living in the world full of stress, and
Yup.
Right. And so we need, if you're looking to embrace a more peaceful existence, and you don't know how, that coaching program is a great program. I also am a guide and facilitate journeys. So, if people want to, come to Colorado and experience psychedelics for themselves and want a really thorough guided process that helps them understand who they are, that's also available for people. And I'm building out I have a free men's group that meets over Zoom every third Wednesday of the month. And so any men who are looking for just a space to come and talk about their problems, their challenges, be vulnerable, but be vulnerable in a way that embraces the power behind the vulnerability, or wants to work out what it means to be courageous in the world and embody more of who they are, that's a great free resource that I'm really excited about. And then I'm on Instagram at James Eshelman. I don't post as often as I should, but I do often share some resources that help, convey a perspective of life that is more inclusive of all the pain and suffering that, life inevitably is, but also like the joy and the bliss that comes from us being with the fullness of our experience all the time. And so those are some great places to start.
Cool, man. I had some fun. It was interesting to hear your story and other people's stories and get a little bit more deeper into just what to expect from ayahuasca and psilocybin and these journeys. Thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate you, appreciate your time and sharing, and more importantly, your service to helping people ultimately love themselves. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Love the conversation.